The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, joining you live from Dallas, which is home base for me. If we've not met yet and you don't know me, I'm a management consultant and organizational logotherapist specializing in activating meaning and purpose in organizational cultures and leadership. My team and I help companies to detect and articulate their purpose to thread it through culture and their operations. And we work with forward-reaching organizations to develop inspirational leaders who create cultures where people actually want to come to work and do their best. We provide programs that enable individual team members and leaders to discover and release their passion and purpose at work to catalyze fulfillment, engagement, and productivity. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at elisecortez.com. Now, if you like the content of the show, you may also be interested in my next book coming out in March of 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization: How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. You can pre-order your copy at bookshop.org or barnesandnoble.com. Now, let's get into today's program. With us today is Daphne Jones, who has 30-plus experience in general management and executive levels roles at IBM, Johnson & Johnson, Hospira, and General Electric, but began her career as a secretary. She's the author of When They Say You Won't, Break Through Barriers and Keep Leveling Up Your Success. She recently started a company that teaches leaders how to prepare to serve on boards. We'll be talking about the problem and opportunity people of color and women face in navigating their careers, her concept of serving as your own product manager and using her edit steps to navigate a career well, and the importance of learning to walk in new shoes as we ascend along our goal trajectory. She joins you today from Miami Beach, Florida. Daphne, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Hi, Elise. It's great to be here, and hello to everybody for joining us.
You are magnificent. And let's just showcase this magnificent thing that you birthed into the world. Here it is. Look at this gorgeous thing you did, Daphne.
It's a baby girl. I think she's a girl.
Yeah, I think she's a girl too, and she's a beaut. And since we're both authors, as we were saying before we got on air, listeners and viewers, which you may not understand, it's when you put a book out into the world, most people don't realize that about 30% of that effort is writing and creating and birthing the book. The other 70% is promoting and talking about it, helping people understand it's out there and available for them. So here we are talking about this beautiful book.
Yeah, thank you. You're
welcome. So to kick us off here, Daphne, your book opens so beautifully. And you had me at hello with your book when you really talk about, how you and your parents immigrated from Jamaica and they wanted you and your siblings to have this great American life of opportunity. Yeah. And you wanted that too. But tell us how it first began for you. It wasn't quite that way at first.
Yeah, we were very, I'd say we lived in poverty. We did have a house and one bathroom that served 7 people, no air conditioning, no dishwasher. Well, no, I was the dishwasher. We didn't have a washing machine. We had to wash clothes by hands, living in a very poor town called Phoenix, Illinois. But my mother did not have a poor mindset. And she did not have a poor sense of hope. She believed in victory. She believed in education, even though they were immigrants from Jamaica and were undereducated. My mom cleaned bedpans for a living at hospitals, and my father was on the assembly line in manufacturing and had the midnight shift. And so they did not live the life that they planned for us, but expected us to be educated. And they said, education is everything and everything is education. And so that really stuck with me. But even through going through school, I've been racially assaulted in white towns where I thought I had a nice girlfriend, white girlfriend, who was my dear friend, but we go to town and I end up getting assaulted. So all my life I've been, in either encouraged and then pushed back, encouraged and then beaten up, encouraged and seemingly disqualified and told that I would not win. And so I went through high school, and another situation happened where my high school counselor said, I don't care what your mom said, but you're not going to be anything but a secretary. You should not go to college. And so I didn't. I listened to this man who his job was to tell me what to do. That's his job. And I said, well, he must know what he's talking about. So I ended up actually going to be a secretary at Women's Day magazine in downtown Chicago. And at least I thought I had it going on. I mean, I'm taking the train to downtown Chicago. I'm a secretary, and to the assistant editor of the magazine. And by the way, it's a women's magazine, Women's Day magazine, but the business was run by all men. And so that was the beginning of my seeing incongruous situations in life, that things that seem to be a certain way shouldn't be, but they were. So I ended up doing that. And after just a few short weeks or a month or two, I realized I should not be a secretary. I should have a secretary. Because
you say that in the book.
You're right. I'm serious, because what they were doing, it didn't seem like rocket science. It wasn't Greek. But what they had on me that I didn't have, they went to college and I didn't. And maybe some of them didn't even go to college, because you never know how people make it in life. Some of them go to college, some don't. But I said, you know what? I need to learn what they learned about business and accounting and finance and things like that. And so I ended up going to college, and unbeknownst to my high school counselor, I got my college bachelor's degree in 3 years instead of 4. And I got my MBA in 1 year instead of 2. All the while hearing his voice in the back of my mind as an adjutant spurring me on to say, he told me I couldn't, but I think I can. I think I will. In fact, the word impossible is not going to be in my vocabulary anymore. The word is now going to be inevitable. And that was the beginning of my being a disobedient student and a stubborn person who said, when somebody tells me the word impossible, I'm going to say, no, it's just a matter of time. It's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it began.
I love that. Great way to open the show, Daphne. It's really important that listeners and viewers understand who they're listening to, who they're getting their mentorship from. So a couple of things to clarify. So first, I want to make sure that you identify yourself as you wish to be identified. You say you call yourself a Jamaican American in your book, but something else.
Yeah, sometimes we call ourselves Jamaican.
Jamaican, that's it.
Yeah. Born in the United States, but born to Jamaican parents. So
okay.
I call myself a Jamaican. Yeah.
Okay, Jamaican. I love that term, by the way. And then the second thing, by the way, I had one of those secretary jobs too when I first got out of college.
Really?
It didn't last me very long either. I got fired by my boss because he said, you can do more. Get out of here. Anyway, it was great. He saved my life. But the second thing I want to ask you is, what is your actual bachelor's degree in? Some kind of engineering, I'm guessing.
No, actually, I got my degree in management, and I got my MBA in marketing. But right, it was funny, through IBM. IBM sends you through engineering school for many, many weeks, and they teach you everything you need to know about technology and programming and things like that. So, yeah.
Okay, so then the third thing I wanted to say before I bring up the next topic is, I really appreciate how you talked about this college counselor. I had something similar, not quite. But you say I was able to take the negative energy of my counselor's predictions and biases and use it as an adjutant to spur me on to achieve. You used that word adjutant before, but I want to really showcase you didn't get pushed and squashed down by this. You used it as an energetic force to guide your energies and your drive. And I think that's really important to celebrate about you, Daphne.
Thank you. My mom, is because of her on this side. One day I came home from school, Elise, and I had an A on my paper. And I said, Mom, look at my paper. Look at my paper. She said, Daphne, whose handwriting is this? And I said, Mom, it's my handwriting. All the Black girls write like this. She said, Daphne, you're not Black, you're British. From that point on, I was confused the rest of my life, because nobody ever called me British before. They'd called me other words that don't start with D, but they never called me British. But she really, at that point, Jamaica was under the British rule. until 1962 or whatever. So it was a sense of pride. And Britain, the UK, had invented so many things: polo and basketball, volleyball, yachting, all kinds of things. And so she attributed that with excellence. And so it was that instilling of living and thinking higher than your lived experience that made me say, well, what he said, I tried it out for a minute, but it's not right. So I became, when somebody tells me now that I can't do something, it's an adjutant to me. I'm like, okay, well, watch me work.
Right. I mean, get out of my way while you're at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for the idea. I'm going to try that idea now.
Well, and that's what I want to, it's the importance of reframing. And you do this beautifully through your edit transformation process. We'll get into in just a second. But I want to, if we can next, let me read just a few sentences from your book that really frame beautifully. I love how your book, Daphne, is really about empowering, educating, and preparing your readers to get through some stuff. And this stuff, I want to share it right here. So you say, initially, I wrote this book for women of color, and people of color, because data has shown that those groups tend to have micro-inequalities and blatant discrimination thrust upon them. Society doesn't seem to value or expect as much from us as it does from the majority, and doesn't consistently seem to give the benefit of the doubt or assurance that the majority may receive. This is really important. So you're addressing some of this discrimination, bias, and outright racism, but in a way that doesn't make these people wrong and bad and awful, but just shows us how to get past that. And I really applaud that, Daphne.
Thank you. I believe that we can't always decide what happens to us or control what happens to us, but I believe we can control how we respond to situations. And the fact that women are underpaid, 80 cents, and that's probably being generous. Women entrepreneurs only get 2% of venture capital out of 100%, which is incredible. We are used, overlooked, undervalued, and things like that. And so as a result of that, I can't change everybody's perspective, but what I can do is say, well, there's a way to work in that system. There's a way to work with people who talk over you. There's ways to decide if you can be your Black self or you can be your feminine self in the company. And you got to just look around and have context. So I want people to understand that they're not bad people, but it is a fact. And so how do you work within the fact? And there are times when I use this phrase a lot, that we are not only a product of our environment. I'm working in this book, especially in the transform section, that I want the environment to become a product of us. I want us to change and level up and go and be a better individual or a better swimmer, a better teacher, or a better worker, or a better wife, whatever. But as we're doing that, we also will help other people become better. We will help transform the environment around us too. So I'm empowering people to not look at themselves and where they want to be, but also look at people around you and help them as well.
Mm-hmm. And that's so powerful. I mean, so part of what you said in the book, which was just a part of what you just said there, is you help the people that reported to you over the years that were part of your teams, but also these readers to systematically deconstruct for themselves the momentum that has been set against them, while at the same time, to what you just said, elevating and modeling and teaching and coaxing and coaching this higher level of consciousness and way of being and relating that we all benefit from.
Amen. Yeah,
right?
There's this thing about suffering in silence or asking permission to prosper. We don't need permission to prosper. We can define our own narrative. He defined narrative for me. He gave me limits. He gave me labels. And there are many times that women are just told, well, can I? Yes. Define your why, define your purpose. I love live working on purpose, because that's what people need to do. If you understand why you are here, what you love, what your propensity is and your proclivity is to do, then find a way to go get it done and do it. And don't suffer in silence waiting for somebody from the top to pull you up, even though we do all work for people. Everyone works for someone. But there's a way that you work within the context of your organization and you can still win.
Mm-hmm. And that's really one way to help them do that is through your edit transformation process that your book teaches. So if you could, I want to be able to set this out for our listeners and viewers. We're not going to dive into each one of these heavily, but I want them to understand the beautiful structure of your book and that you have created these steps. And so would you just talk us briefly through your edit process?
Sure. Can I give a context first?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Context is if you think about as a software developer, which is what I used to do back in the day. And back in the day, we would have something called the software development life cycle. It's just like the way you bake a cake. You go to the store, you get flour, eggs, you mix it together, you put it in the oven, you let it sit 30 minutes. There's a process for getting applications written, just like there's a process for baking a cake. And so it's that process that is the SDLC, but edit is what I call the PDLC. It's your personal development life cycle. And doesn't just end when you get to the end of edit, it allows you to begin again. And so my belief is that if we can be like an app, just as the iOS on our iPhone is at version 16, or the Waze app, or the dating app, or the Uber app, or whatever the apps are, none of them are at version 1 anymore. They're now at version 1 plus. Some are at 3, some are at 8. iOS is at 16. Well, why can't we be at another version of ourselves? Just as an app, it gets developed, somebody plans it, somebody builds it, somebody runs it. We run the app on our phones. And then if the app goes bad or it breaks or it's going to get bigger and scaled, then somebody maintains that app and grows it. So edit is that very same thing. It stands for envision, design, iterate, and transform. And very briefly, envision just says, let me reimagine or imagine what it is that I'd like to be. If you don't have a vision for where you want to go, you won't get there or you'll end up anywhere. So envision is about having a vision for yourself. And those that read the good book know that the word says, have a vision, write it down or make it plain. Because if you don't have that, you'll end up anywhere. So that is first what you have to have. Your mindset needs to be ready to grab on to what it is that you are great at and what you are here for. The D just says, let's prepare yourself. Let's put a roadmap in place, because you're driving from here to California. You just don't get in your car and just drive. You have a plan of how you're going to get there, where you might sleep along the way, where you might eat, when you're going to get gas, and do you have are your tires healthy and things like that. So the D is designing a plan for how you're going to reach your E, your vision, your envision. And then after you design your plan, then you step out, you jump into the pool, and you start working that plan that you created. And by the way, that plan that was created was what I call risk adjusted. It didn't assume that you won't have a flat tire on your way to California. You make sure you have a spare in your trunk. And so there are things that could go right and things that could go really wrong. And so you kind of think with the members of your stakeholders, your board of directors, your mentors, your sponsors, about what could go right or what could go wrong. So you do that in your D, and then your iterate is when you run it, and then you get feedback from people, from the marketplace that you happen to be in. If you want to learn how to be a better speaker, you do your first talk, and then you get feedback, about how did you do. You want to learn how to swim, you jump in the pool, maybe for the first time or the 10th time or what have you, but you get feedback, and you make that decision to not quit. You take that information as data, as strategic, and you don't quit. You just use it as input so you can refine your plan a little bit and then get back on the road. And then the T is transform. Once you have done that, you've swum enough times, you've done speaking enough times, you have now transformed into a better speaker or the senior vice president or what have you. And that transformation, you were a director, now you're a senior vice president. You were a lousy speaker, now you're an okay speaker. You couldn't swim, now you can. And so you've transformed into something that you've always wanted to be. And then you sit there and rest and learn how to swim more, do a better job at those things that you wanted to do. But then you say, you know what? I've learned how to swim. I think I now want to learn how to be a lifeguard. So now you've just gone to another level and you have a new vision for what you want to do next. So now you're at level 2 or version 2 of your new self.
And we just keep going for the rest of our lives.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, the edit gives you a tool set. If you have the right mindset, I give you the tool set. To your point, Elise, it'll then give you a skill set for life to how always to improve yourself.
I think it's so actionable. It's just great. So on that note, let's grab our first break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Daphne Jones, who is the author of When They Say You Won't. So let me start with that. When They Say You Won't. Break through barriers and keep leveling up your success. We've been talking a bit about her background, where she came from, and how she really is a walking billboard and can teach what she has in her book. After the break, we're going to get into this notion of how do we serve as our own product manager. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us, and welcome back to Working on Purpose. Before we get back into the program with Daphne, I want to invite you to check out the first book that I put out called Purpose Ignited. I really wrote the book to awaken readers to their passion and purpose and start them down the path of becoming inspirational leaders. It's the basis of my leadership program, so I hope you'll check that out as well. If you are just joining us today, my guest is Daphne Jones, who has a 30-plus year experience in general management and executive level roles at IBM, Johnson & Johnson, Hospira, and General Electric, but began her career as a secretary. She's the author of When They Say You Won't, Break Through Barriers and Keep Leveling Up Your Success. She recently started a company that teaches leaders how to prepare to serve on boards. Pretty exciting. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So for this next bit here, Daphne, I just really appreciate how you, and this is something that I really want to encourage our listeners and viewers on how you've taken and borrowed from your background in software development and IT and ported that over into what you're talking about to us about managing careers and lives. So I'm really delighted about this notion of being our own product managers. We're a product that we can put out into the marketplace. I just think that is so delightful. And your whole approach to managing this process is so great, because you say in the book pretty early on, you say, many thought leaders tell us to dream big, just like the technology visionaries who have changed our world. But if you only dream big without a solid strategy for the foundation to achieve those dreams, that big dream can be more daunting than inspiring, and it will remain a dream.
Yeah, absolutely right. So a product, I'm one of those parable people. I like to make the complex simple. And with my husband being a pastor, he always likes to interpret the Bible in a certain way so that the parishioners can understand it with stories. So I started my thinking about how do I help people to understand how I did it. And the way I thought about that was, well, wait a minute. We are actually like an app. An app is a product. So it could be a product or a service. And when I think about how I see people whose careers are running down the field without them, they're on the sidelines watching, well, there goes my career, because they're not actively trying to drive it. They're just letting it happen. They're letting it float in the water like a cork, and the cork, wherever the waves go, the cork goes. And so you see your career going down there. So I said, no, we have to have an active, accountable, intentional approach for how to manage in the middle of working for a company or in the middle of having a boss. How do you have an intentional mindset and approach about this? And so I said, well, as a product, what does a product do? A product serves a market. A product has value that it brings to people who love what it does. And so that is sort of like what I do. And, in the marketplace, if you're an HR professional, your marketplace is the talent that's in your company. If you're a CFO, your market is the CEO and usually the board of directors and shareholders and analysts and et cetera. So everybody has a market. Number two, products have competition. There's somebody who wants my seat at the table. As a CIO, there was somebody, believe me, and I write about it in the book, who wanted my job and tried their best to take it. So every product has competition. Coke has Pepsi, Lowe's has Home Depot, right? Apple has Samsung. So we have competition as well. We have a price. A product has a price. In our case, that price is our compensation. We are paid salary and bonus and whatnot. And we also have a value. So if we find that our value is higher than our price, we're good to go. But if we find that our price and our salary is not as high, is higher than our value, then we're going to either get fired, get demoted, or just like a product, we'll be put on a lower shelf, in the grocery store because we don't have that value. And last thing about a product is a product needs to have continuous improvement. It needs to improve itself and be more relevant for the times. Otherwise, it'll be like a carton of milk that has an expiration date. You don't want to have an expiration date. And so that is what the purpose of Edit is about, is to help you have that be continually worthwhile and relevant as well. So as a product manager, you control how you introduce your product to your market. You have to understand if the net promoter score of your boss or of your clients and your customers, your teams, your peers, how do they value you? How do they view you? Are they satisfied with you as a partner, or are they dissatisfied with you as a partner? So if you look at yourself that way, and almost as a non-emotional way, then I think we have an ability to then position ourselves to be the best product that we can and continually improve ourselves. So that's the gist about product management.
Okay, one word: gorgeous. 2 words: magnificent. Just really open something for us, Stephanie. And I want you to know, when I read, I've been doing this for 7.5 years. I read the books cover to cover because you're part of my ongoing education. So, for example, the next thing I want you to talk about is your whole SHIP competency model. I went through and I mapped through of those competencies that you had. Which ones did I have competencies in? S for strategic, H for hands-on executor, I for influencer leader, and P for people relationship builder. I found that incredibly useful to understand where are my competencies in relation to this. So I love that you give us so many really actionable tools that I think help people to think very differently about themselves and them being their own product manager.
Yeah, my goal is to use business tools in the book because I believe that if we're like a product, if we're doing all this work for our companies, why can't we do the same work and use the same tools for ourselves? Mm-hmm. And we're doing these things to help our companies win in the marketplace. Why can't we use the same tools to help ourselves win in our marketplace, right? I almost called it HIPS because my book was for women. I said, you know what? Let me not call it HIPS. Let me call it SHIP because it started with hands-on. And I think part of the whole purpose of that whole beginning of the book was to understand your superpower. Everyone's got a superpower. And we've been sold and given seeds of misdirection. No, girls don't do math. Well, maybe that girl doesn't, but that girl might. Girls don't do science. Black men can't become CEO of hedge funds. There's all these things that are fed to us. And so I want in the first part of the book to say, what are you good at? Because you're good at something. And your purpose, in my opinion, is the intersection between your capability and your passion. And everyone's got something. And so the SHIP model was really just designed to say, when you were winning, and you won last week, you won last year, you won 4 years ago, remember that time when you won. What were you doing? How were you behaving? Were you like calling the plays and, like this and directing people? Or were you like, rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty? Because then that says something about you that you should keep on doing that. And so that's kind of where the SHIP model came from, is I want people to know you're just not going to go blindly into this win. You're going to go intentionally with thought and remembering where you were so you can now forge your path forward.
Mm-hmm. Gorgeous. Okay, so next, what I want to talk about, because I want to give our listeners and viewers as much as we possibly can from your
Sure.
book, you talk about blind spots. And this is really, really important, because I know in the work that I do, developing leaders and developing cultures, it's that, it's if you don't have the self-understanding, the self-awareness, you can't go anywhere.
Right.
So you say in your book, we all have blind spots. Feedback shrinks them. So I advise seek feedback from people whom you respect, who have a vantage point to see your performance or behavior, or who are successfully charting a course that may mirror where you are headed. And when you get feedback, be slow to do a knee-jerk reaction, but quick to listen and appropriately adjust your behavior or your plan. That is golden advice right there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And there's something called Johari's window. And you ever have the situation where, you have spinach in your teeth and you go to the bathroom and you just had, you just saw 20 people coming and talking to you. You go to the bathroom and the spinach is in your teeth. Well, how come somebody didn't tell me I had spinach in my tooth? And that's sort of what Johari's window or the blind spot is like, where other people see it, but they may not tell you, but you for sure don't see it. And there are things where maybe you talk too much, or you cut people off, or you're always late, or maybe you're really good at something as well, and you just don't know what but other people do. And so that blind spot is there to take the blindfold off of yourself, so that you can now say, okay, I know I cut people off. Let me stop that. Let me improve myself in that capacity so that people are not offended by the fact that I cut them off. So the blind spot is really to give you more information. The more information that you have about who you are, how you're performing, how you are affecting other people, the more you can then affect people in the way you want to. And so it's emotional intelligence, or having a good emotional quotient, because it's about being aware is the first thing about emotional intelligence, and then being able to control what you're aware of.
Right.
I cut people off, but I can't help myself. Well, that's not good emotional intelligence. You have to know you cut people off, and you have to be able to control it, and then have empathy for that person and understand how you communicate better. And so that's really what it's all about. And so you're going to surround yourself with people who are in your circle and who are in your corner, who are going to be willing to tell you when you're slipping and going off the deep end, because they're supposed to be there to help you to win as well. And that's why they're in your circle and in your corner.
I just really applauded just how important feedback is, and soliciting it and how you respond to it is just so critical. So I just wanted to be sure and celebrate that.
And the thing about listening, I'm sorry, I cut you off. The thing about listening and hearing, and there was a point in the book I wanted to raise, that hearing is what we do. That's what our ears do, just naturally. But listening is when you decide to take what you heard and do something with it. So I got a lot of feedback during my years, and I had to hear it. I heard them. Okay, I hear you. But then I had to go and reflect on it, and then decide if I was going to listen to it. And then there's just a way I talk about in the book of how do you take that feedback and how do you listen to it, for purpose.
Yeah, and contribution and feedback isn't created equally, right? There are some places where you talk about in the book where it makes more sense to really listen to that feedback, and others where we recognize what's that source, and maybe that isn't quite as useful to us. And that's really important to distinguish, and you do that in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, I call it taking in the meat and spitting out the bones.
Yes. Yes, you have a lot of amazing phrases in your book, ways of seeing things that just make it really colorful and juicy and yummy. So
thank you.
You're welcome. Let's grab our last break here. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Daphne Jones, who's the author of When They Say You Won't, Break Through Barriers and Keep Leveling Up Your Success. We've been talking a bit about this idea of serving as our own product manager here in this section. In the last and final segment, we're going to talk about this concept of walking in our new shoes. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. One other bit of news I want to share with you is the anthology that I worked to curate, where I gathered the stories of 25 women from around the world. They share actually how they discovered their purpose, how they're now serving from it, is now available. It's called Passionately Striving and Why. And the stories come from women from Australia all the way to Zambia. And I'm actually so proud of this thing I could bust. So I hope you'll check that out as well. We're out there at Amazon getting Daphne's book. If you're now just joining us, my guest is Daphne Jones. She has 30 plus years of experience in general management and executive level roles at IBM, Johnson & Johnson, Hospira, and General Electric, but began her career as a secretary. She is the author of When They Say You Won't, Break Through Barriers and Keep Leveling Up Your Success. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So for this last segment here, I wanted to dive into this notion here. We've been talking about this notion we're going to constantly edit ourselves through our lives. We're going to continually to iterate ourselves and become this higher version controls of ourselves as we go along. And I really like your idea, Daphne, of walking in new shoes. Will you tell us a bit more about what it is to walk in new shoes?
Yeah, I got that phrase from people are saying, well, he's got a pair of big shoes to fill, or she's got a pair of big shoes to fill, when they're talking about coming in after an amazing leader. And so that amazing leader had big shoes and they filled them up with greatness, being a great leader, being a servant leader, having great vision, compassion, head, heart, guts, etc. And so when I think about the fact that we go from what we were doing to now what we're becoming, we are transforming into this new, bigger, higher capable person than where we were before. And so, I jokingly will say that you were a size 8 before, now you're a size 8.5. Now you're a size 9, because now you have capability that you didn't have 2 months ago or 2 years ago. So you're walking in these new shoes, and they're going to fit differently, and they may feel a little weird, because you have not been a board member before. You had not been a senior vice president before. You have not had an audience of 1,000 people that you were going to speak in front of before. So they're going to feel a little different. And so part of that moment, and there's a phrase that I heard from someone that says, don't let your talent take you where your character can't keep you. You have this talent that you now just earned this new role, but now you have to sit in it and appreciate it and walk in those new shoes and realize the responsibility that you have. And when I first would get a job, I realized that I had to learn the job. Where are the restrooms? Who's reporting to me? Who do I report to? What time does the 8 o'clock meeting really start? So you have to learn the job. And then you have to do the job, because now you have it as a senior vice president. But then you don't stop there. You find a way to improve that job and leave it better than when you found it, so you can go get your next job. And so it's sitting in that size 8 shoe that is now your size 8.5. You now have responsibility that you're accountable for, whether you're learning how to swim, you now want to be a lifeguard, or whatever it happens to be. You sit in that. And then you figure out, okay, I'm doing okay. I have my buddies. I've got my mentor and my sponsors with me. I'm going to do a good job, and I'm not going to be in a hurry to go to the next thing. I'm going to make this thing mature a little bit as I sit in it.
I think that's such an accessible concept. And for me, as somebody who helps catalyze development and change and growth, I love that concept, because you really are folding all that into your person. You're going from size 8 to size 8.5 because you're standing in your growth. And I just think that's really compelling, Daphne.
Yeah.
So the next thing that I wanted to talk about, this is incredibly important. You have so many zinger topics in your book here, but this is so important. Talking about the difference between assimilation and authenticity when it comes to folding yourself into a culture. To distinguish those for us.
Yeah, sure. So assimilation is a lot of times what women do in an all-male environment. People of color may do in an all-white environment. If you're gay, lesbian, you have to think about that in a straight environment. It's usually when the minority or a person or a culture or a group has to resemble what the majority's beliefs and values and behaviors are. And at some point you leave yourself, you get out your car every day and you've got to leave some of you behind. As a Black woman, can I celebrate Kwanzaa openly? Can I go to Martin Luther King birthday before it was a holiday? Will I be? And I personally had to think of those things as I was working in a majority company. Should I just come to work? Because, I don't want them to think that I'm I'm a rebel or I'm trying to start a revolution here by supporting Martin Luther King. So that's the assimilation, trying to be and fit in the culture. Authenticity now is the other side as well. You know what? To heck with them. I'm going to be who I am. I'm a Black woman from Jamaica, and I'm going to wear my red and my green, colors and my African colors. And I'm going to have pictures of Harriet Tubman in my cubicle, and I'm going to do all kinds of things that show my Blackness. And so in both situations, you either leave yourself behind or you are putting so much of yourself forward. But what really matters is the company's values. What does the company value? And your first rule, your first order of business is to help the company win. Your culture should not be so important that it overshadows and distracts the people that are working with you, so that all they think about is Daphne's culture and Daphne's hair and Daphne's whatever. But at the same time, you want them to respect your culture and respect who you are and where you came from. So I believe that you have to assimilate in some cases, because there are rules, just like the NBA cannot go to their game without wearing a certain kind of clothing. They have to either wear a suit or they have to look nice. Those are the rules of the NBA. Otherwise, they're not going to play that game that night. That's assimilation. But they're still going to be their authentic selves. They may wear different color shoes or different color socks or whatever. And there's a way that you can do both. But it is really a tough situation. And people need to know, and leaders need to know, that they have to make that call because it's about the company first and basically you second.
Powerful distinction, Daphne. So powerful. I couldn't let you, as an identity person, I could not let you off the air until we talked about that. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
So next, one thing that you said that I just really, again, very, very powerful phrasing that you use. You say, it is said, if you are not sitting at the table, then you are likely on the menu. This is really important to talk about here. So you say, if we are not able to be in the room and at the table where decisions are made about policy, the succession pipeline, procurement, pay, and other issues, it will be difficult for us to be able to influence those decisions to represent the values of all stakeholders more appropriately. So true. But that whole thing of, if you are not sitting at the table and you are likely on the menu, I mean, somebody else is making the choices and choosing whether they want to nibble on you or not.
Yeah.
I think that's really powerful.
Yeah. And I think it kind of goes back to the other topic. I had to assimilate, because there are people who say, you know what, I'm going to show them. I'm not going to play these games. I'm going to be myself. Well, you can be yourself. You won't get that next promotion. So you have to play the long game. And what I call the long game is being able to see beyond this particular battle and know that you're going to make it to a level of leadership or capability or whatever it is that you want, by being able to look past these little things because you have your eye on a big thing. So I say that as it relates to being on a board, for example. As I sit on boards of directors, the CEOs, had to wrestle with the George Floyd murder. And they said, Daphne, how do we handle what do I do? I want my Black employees to know that I really care, but I've never gone through a situation like what George Floyd went through. But in my role, they're now able to say, you've got to make sure that your Black people are paid commensurate with what the whites are. You've got to make sure your policies about hiring people are not going to be discriminatory against people. Like, for instance, an African-American male is going to get a higher sentence for having marijuana than his white counterpart. Well, so if we have a thing about you can't have been arrested for marijuana as your hiring policy, then that's going to let a lot of Black men, not be qualified. And so it's how do you look? So as my role as a board member, I can now speak to the people that are at the table, and I can say, where is your diverse slate of people that's going to be the next CFO or the next CHRO or the next chief legal officer or what have you? But if I'm not at the table where we are having those discussions about the next slate of candidates who should be diverse, then they won't be. And then if you don't have a diverse board, you won't have a diverse leadership team. And if you don't have a diverse leadership team, then the next level down won't be diverse either. And so you have the opportunity to now influence others by having that long view and being able to say it's a business issue. Procuring with minorities is important. Paying minorities the same is important because you want that diversity of mindset. You want the diversity of talent to be able to win in the marketplace. And so if you're not at the table, there's somebody making decisions about you, and it's not going to be pretty.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I wish I could keep you longer. We're getting close to the end here. I have two more things I want to be sure and have you talk about.
Okay, I'll try to do it quickly if you want. Go ahead.
You're doing great. You're doing great. I want you to definitely tell us about your launch. Here you are launching this new book. You're taking your life and your career to your own your next new version. Incredibly exciting. The world totally needs your work and who you are. I want to hear about this next thing that you're doing. What's the next?
Well, that's a great question. My next right now is my board class, my board work. I really want to have women of color, people, again, I'm into those, if you've been overlooked, undervalued, taken for granted, and are not the normal pedigree of the same white guy and CFO, CEO type. I want those people to realize that they have a value sitting in boards. Boards are dealing with all kinds of things now: digital, cyber, ERG, which is environmental, social, and governance. They're dealing with quiet quitting and talent issues and activist investors and supply chain disruption. Not every CEO and CFO is going to be able to handle that. And so there are people that have a supply chain background, that have an IT background, that are not necessarily CEOs and CFOs or white men, who can attribute and help drive innovation in these companies. And so my next is to really take my company and scale it. And I want to have partnerships with key organizations. Google is one of my clients, as an example, and I'm looking to have other large companies like Google to be able to be part of what I'm doing. So my goal is to scale my company, and that's my next thing. As part of the movement, I really want every woman and every person, it doesn't have to be only for women, it's for anybody who feels that they have not had a fair shot and they have not known how to maneuver in their space. How do you think about your life? And I want people to join the movement to know that you don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to ask for permission to prosper. You can handle your own career and not let it run down the field without you. You can manage your own narrative, not have somebody else manage it for you. And so that's my movement, and that's really what I'm trying to do next in my career.
Talk about mattering, Daphne Jones. That's fantastic. I will be cheering for you, and I'll help you any way I can. That's so great. The world needs this desperately. We've come to the end. The show is listened to by people around the world who want to create a workplace where they actually want to come to work and give their best. We create those inspirational leaders that lead them to their greatness, and we do business that betters the world. What would you like to leave them with?
I would say Harriet Tubman is my role model. And she has, and if you were to be in my office in my home in New York, you would see the picture of her. She's going this way with a rifle under her arm and a lantern in her hand. And I think she's going north. I think north is that way. And so, and then behind her, she's got enslaved people who are trying to be free. She's pushing into dangerous areas. She's pushing into new situations, new forests, new danger. She could get killed, lynched, whatever. But at the same time as she's pushing forward, she's pulling people with her. Yes. She is what we call taking the elevator and sending it down so others can get on and win. She is helping women and men and children learn how to win. So that's our job, is to push as we learn and pull people along with us.
What a beautiful way to finish. Daphne, you are a gem. I'm so happy to know you, have learned from you, and will continue to evangelize your movement. Thank you for being on Working on Purpose.
You're awesome, Elise. Thank you.
Listeners and viewers, who want to learn more about Daphne Jones, her book or her new work, helping leaders to serve on boards, go to her website. It's daphneejones.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on the air with firecracker Scott Jeffrey Miller, talking about his latest book, Master Mentors, Transformative Insights from the Greatest Minds, Volume 2. Scott shared some of the stories and insights from the remarkable mentors he showcases. It was incredibly enlightening and inspiring. Next week, we'll be on the air with Paul Skinner for a second time, talking about his thought-provoking and soul-energizing book, The Purpose Upgrade. Change your business to save the world. Change the world to save your business. Paul has been on the program before when we talked about his first book, Collaborative Advantage. He is wicked smart, and I've already read his book, and our conversation will open your perspective to a whole new way purpose can ever be upgraded to add agency and impact to your organization. It's phenomenal. Next level. Amazing stuff. And remember, work is an integral and important part of our lives and can be one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune in to Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.